There's a common saying that technology, if advanced enough, is basically magic, and the Artificer class embodies that idea completely. Hey fellow Game Masters, I'm Richard Quiner, and welcome back to the RPG Daily, your daily dose of all things tabletop role-playing games, helping you build your world and master your game. Now, we just finished a whole series on clerics. We previously did one on barbarians, but I wanted to do a series on the newest class in official Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and that is the Artificer. These guys came from the Eberron source book that recently came out, Rising from the Last War, I believe, is what it's called. And they are a really interesting class, and we're going to talk all about them. Getting into the class, Artificers are essentially, they are a magic user, they're a spellcaster, but they're very different in how they utilize their magics than the others. They get their magic abilities from their tools and their skills with the tools. They're kind of inventors. They kind of channel their skills with the tools to make inventions that create the magic effect. That's kind of how they work in a nutshell. In today's video, we're going to go over the class basics, all the rules, and what this class gets. We're not going to touch on the spell casting because that does require a bit more information. There's also an Artificer thing called infusions that will be its own video as well. We'll touch on that when we get to it today though. So let's start talking about the Artificer. The Artificer class comes from Eberron, like I mentioned. Eberron is a world where science and magic has kind of blended in a way different than the Forgotten Realms world, and the Artificer just embodies that perfectly. They are inventors, they love lore, they love finding new materials to work with, and really pushing the boundaries of what they're able to create. That's kind of the Artificer, and as a player, you might like to find a way to do this in your own game. What kind of invention would you create that is magic but also technology? What would you come up with? Think about what your Artificer does and how they got involved in being an Artificer. Maybe they were an apprentice to another. Maybe they have a rival that they're trying to beat out of the system, similar to Pokemon. You have a lot of different options of how and why your Artificer would go out in the world and travel and see what's out there and be an adventurer. As you begin to build your Artificer, remember that its main ability score is intelligence. So that you'll want that to be the highest ability score right off the bat. It's going to be involved in all its spell casting and all its tinkering that it's going to be doing. Now the Artificer, for hit dice and getting into the basics, the hit dice is going to be a D8 hit die, which is equal to the rogue. So it's decent. It's not the weakest, but it's also not the strongest. You immediately gain proficiency in light and medium armor, which gives you a chance to have some decent armor class. You also gain proficiency in simple weapons, which is a pretty common proficiency to have. You don't get martial weapons, which means you're going to be limited on what kind of weapons you can have unless you pick a race that gives you extra proficiency in martial weapons, which those exist. You also get a lot of proficiency in tools. You get Tinker's tools, Thieves tools, and one Artisan tool right off the bat. Tools are your bread and butter. Tools is how you do everything. So pick your tools wisely and you'll be good to go. The saving throws that you get proficiency in are Intelligence and Constitution, which fits your casting spells, you're using magic, and you need to be smart. You also get to choose some skill proficiencies from a pretty long list, in my opinion. You have options for Arcana, Investigation, History, Nature, Medicine, Perception, and Sleight of Hand. So you have a lot of things. Most of these are intelligence-based, some are wisdom, but then you do have Sleight of Hand, which is a dexterity thing, which could tie into the tinkering aspect of the Artificer. The starting equipment list for the Artificer doesn't give you as many options as other classes get. You start off, you get 2 simple weapons. Your choice. I would almost always pick something that fits with the theme of what I'm building and hits hard at the same time. You also get a light crossbow and 20 bolts. You also get the option between studded leather armor or scale mail armor. Now, this is an interesting thing because studded leather armor is a little more hefty than other classes might get. Like a rogue, I believe, starts out with just leather armor. Scale mail is even heavier than that. So it's interesting that this is a spellcaster, but they have to beef up a little bit. They have to have some good armor on in order to survive. You also get a Thieves tool set and a Dungeoneer's pack. You can look up what a Dungeoneer's pack has inside it online or in any of your books. Next, we're going to talk about the swag, the stuff we all get at different levels building this. It's important to understand, talking about this class and its spell casting, when it talks about touching something or casting a spell, What it really means is you are tinkering or creating something or crafting an item. So it's not so much touch like this touch, but it's more like touch with your wrench and your screwdriver and make something special. Now with that said, at level 1 you get the ability called Magical Tinkering. This, you get to use your tools, you touch an object, and you get to give it a magical property. You can use this with one action touching a tiny non-magical item, and you can pick one of the following special magical abilities that it can then have. One is it can cast 5 feet of bright light followed by 5 feet of dim light, a 5-foot radius I should say. The other, it could keep a 6-second recorded message that when someone touches it, it plays that message back, kind of like a little Walkman, I guess. The other option, you could continually emit an odor or a sound. If that could be handy, I don't know. And last, you could create a visual effect on the surface of the object. That could be words or a picture, something that is constantly there. This could be good for sending a message or something of the sort. At level 1 is also when you get spellcasting as an artificer. Like I said, we're going to come back to this tomorrow. It's a little too much for one video to talk about all the spellcasting rules as well, but this is when you would get that. And just like all the other spellcasters, you do have a list of spell slots levels and how many spell slots you get for each level and how many spells you can have prepared, that kind of thing as well. At level 2, you get the ability Infuse Item. Now this is one that's also going to use another video tomorrow. The basics of it is you as an artificer learn several infusions. Those are what you can put in an item. You start out at lower levels, you only know a few, but as you grow in level, you gain more of these infusions in your knowledge banks. For one action after a long rest, you could touch an item, aka tinker with it, and infuse it with one of these infusion properties. Once that infusion is done, the item stays that way, infused, until you die, in which case the infusion will be broken, or until you decide to change it and cast a different infusion into it. A couple stipulations about this is that each object that you infuse can only hold one of the infusions, and also each of the infusions can only be put into one object. So you can't have 5 objects all with the same infusion or one object with 5 infusions in it. You don't have that kind of skills. At level 3 is when you get to pick your subclass. These are called the Artificer Specialists. Similar to the Primal Paths or the Divine Domains, they give you different abilities and different kind of aspects of your class that might come in handy in various ways. For the Artificer, you're dealing with the Artillerist, the Alchemist, and the Battlesmith. These specialist classes also give you extra abilities at level 5, 9, and 15. At level 3, you also get the ability called the Right Tool for the Right Job. Essentially, this means you can spend an hour with your Tinker's tools as part of a rest. If you would like, you can create an item, a tool set that will do a specific job. Any of the tool sets you want, you just have to spend an hour making it. And then you have these items in your possession until you decide to use this ability again to create a different set of tools. When I say tools, this is referring to artisan tools, not necessarily Tinker's tools, but you could build some blacksmithing tools or some brewer's tools, stuff like that could come in handy in more specific situations. At level 4, of course, you're getting the option between an ability score improvement and a feat, either or. Like we said before, ability score improvements, you can increase one ability score by 2 points or 2 ability scores by 1 point each, or you can pick a feat depending on if your dungeon master wants you to play with feats. You'd again get this ability score improvement or feat at levels 8, 12, 16, and 19. At level 6, you get the ability Tool Expertise. Now, Expertise is a fun one. I like getting expertise playing a rogue. This one specifically implies to tools. It gives you a chance when you are using a tool that you are proficient in. To make a check, you can instead double that proficiency. You're an expert in it. At level 7, you get an ability called Flash of Genius, which I think is a really fun one. It shows how you can be so smart that in just the right moment, you can come up with a way to help the situation and make things better. You can use this ability whenever you or an ally within 30 feet of you needs to make an ability check or a saving throw. You can offer up your Flash of Genius and give them a chance to add the intelligence modifier, your intelligence modifier, to the roll that they've rolled, or to the result of that roll. It can also be used a number of times up to your intelligence modifier. At level 10, you get the ability called Magic Item Adept, and this means you understand magic items, even more than the normal person might. What this gives you is the chance to attune to 4 magic items instead of the regular 3, which means you can carry a little more on you. It also means that if you decide to make a magic item, you can make a common or uncommon rarity magic item for less the cost and less the time commitment that it normally would take a normal person. At level 11, you get the ability called Spell Storing Item. Now this also shows your prowess with magic and your understanding of the magic and technology together. As you finish a long rest, you can actually cast a spell into an item. The spell can be levels 1 or 2, and it must be castable with 1 action. You do not have to have the spell prepared to cast, which we'll talk about in the spellcasting video tomorrow. Once the spell is stored in an item, you can then use that item as an action to cast that spell. It does have a limited number of uses though, and that number is 2 times your intelligence modifier. So if your intelligence modifier is +5, you can actually cast a spell 10 times from an item. It doesn't use a spell slot. You don't even have to have this thing prepared. It's just a really good way. If you have a spell that you use a lot, you can just keep it there and then free up some spell slots and usage for yourself in other ways. I like that idea. I think that's really cool. At level 14, you become a magic item savant, which means you can now attune with up to 5 different magic items, and you also get to ignore any requirements to attune to those items. Some items may have racial or stat requirements. You're so good with magic items now, you can just attune to them anyways. At level 18, you become the magic item master, which means you can attune to 6 magic items, double the standard magic items that people can normally attune to, which is 3. At level 20, your pinnacle ability is called Soul of Artifice, and this gives you a couple really cool bonuses that I just hear me out. This is when your connection with magic and infusing it with technology is at its peak. You are the best. So right away, you gain a +1 to saving throws for each magic item that you're attuned to. At this point, you could be attuned to 6 magic items. That gives you an instant +6 bonus to your saving throws. In addition to that, if you are knocked out or taken down to 0 hit points, not killed, just taken down to 0 hit points, you can end an infusion on an item in your inventory, and once that infusion has ended, it will bounce you back up to 1 hit point instead of 0, keeping you in the fight a little bit longer, giving you some more longevity to get out of there or to heal up. But it's important to know that this ability does not work if you're killed outright. Killing outright means you take a certain amount of damage above your normal max hit points, I guess. I haven't really looked into that because I haven't had to use it. I haven't killed anyone in a long time. So if you're killed outright in the game, you can't use this ability to end an infusion and be alive, but it's just if you get knocked out. That is the main gist of the Artificer class. It's a really interesting one. It's like a Tinker Magician. I really like it. I think this could be a fun thing to play. Come back tomorrow when we explain the spellcasting abilities and how the spellcasting works. And the day after that, we're going to cover the infusions and the different infusion abilities that are available to Artificers. And then after that, we're going to get into the specialists and so on. We're doing this whole series, and it's going to end with us making an Artificer specialist class. So, I've been Richard. Thanks for watching.